to the Training Babble podcast. I'm your host, Dave Schell, and I am joined again by Dr. Phil Batterson.
Dave, thanks for having me back on. A little bit different circumstances from our normal podcast episodes that we've recorded in the past, huh?
That's right. Yeah. And if you've been listening or if you have listened in the past, we did a series of fast physiology, and there's probably still some more to be released. But today we're going to do something a little bit different in that, Phil, you've got a huge background in exercise science. You've got a doctorate in exercise science and physiology. But you'd kind of come to me with an idea of kind of doing a collaboration and leaning on me for more of the practical, coaching side to kind of do this project and help you work towards some of your goals. And so, yeah, today we're going to, I guess, kind of take a peek in behind the curtains and see what it's like to get a consult from a coach or just kind of what that process looks like, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's a little selfish. I was like, Dave, you're a good coach. Maybe we can record these and you can, give me some coaching tools and tips and stuff like that. Because something that I've run into in the past is I'm not a good judge of what I can and can't do as well as what I should and shouldn't do. Mm-hmm. So for me, it made more sense. I've been slowly clawing my way up to being healthy and being consistent with my training and stuff like that. And I'm finally getting the itch to want to do, a little bit of a competition next May. We'll see how it goes, but that's like kind of the goal right now is this trail running race. It's 2.5 miles, 2,500 feet of elevation gain up in Washington. And I think it's something that I could do, that I could train for, put a pretty good effort together, and not have to kill myself in terms of training volume, with things like ultra marathons that I've done in the past, Ironmans, other things like that. So this represents a really cool, idea that I've had now that I've been, running consistently. And, I think it would be really cool for people to kind of get a peek behind the curtain, as you were saying, to see, how does Dave actually coach people? Because it's valuable to get to know your coach before, or, have a consult or do something like that. So I think this is a good opportunity. So what I'm hoping today is, we could just kind of go through, I already kind of told you, what one of my goals was, but then walk through setting up a little bit of, a training week or, something along those lines. We don't need to set up, the whole training plan right now, just because I'm still in the early stages of things. But yeah, if we could just go through and start to set up maybe a training week, I think that would be my goal for this episode, at least if you're if you're cool with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'll be good. Hopefully you get something out of it, but I think it'll be good too. Something I think about all the time. I think a lot of age group athletes, when they think about getting a coach, or maybe they never thought about getting a coach, but it's I'm not fast enough, I'm not elite, I can find workouts elsewhere. Why do I need a coach? And it's really, I always think my job as a coach, the workouts are a dime a dozen, right? You can Google and find hundreds of workouts. If you just want to work out, you can go on Zwift or whatever and find them. But it's everything outside of that is what I see as coaching. And so, yeah, I think as a coach, it's almost being a project manager and problem solving. And it's okay, so you're one of the stakeholders. You're the primary stakeholder, right? And it's we have this goal, and it's we have this timeline, and it's okay, how are we going to move from here to here with the resources we have and get buy-in from the stakeholders and all that. So yeah, I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah, and I think the role of a coach too is just to be is to steer the athlete in the right direction as well, right? Because I'm going to be coming to a lot of our talks, hopefully this will turn into, a series with ideas. Yeah. And it's going to be a collaboration, like you said, because I do have background. I do have ideas on how I should train myself and other things like that. So, I'll come with ideas and then, we'll talk those out. And some of the longer conversations we will have offline, but we will try to, show people, exactly like what it is like, or, just what it would look like, if Dave and I were actually having, our coaching talks and those sort of things.
Yeah.
So yeah, where do you want to start here? What's your go-to when you get an individual on, with like a consult or something along those lines?
And I'll just take this as an opportunity to point out that you sound like shit. And
yeah.
So this might be our last call. I'm pretty sure you might die after this. But.
I'll tell you this. This is something I've been battling a lot lately. Is like I got a little bit of a like a head cold.
Yeah.
And I've just been coughing like crazy. But then, like all my numbers in terms of like working out, there's no progression in terms of getting more sick.
Yeah.
Like everything feels fine. So this is like one of those things where typically, like if I was taking more of my conservative approach, I would be like, nope, just going to take it easy today, like whatever. But I'm kind of playing with this idea of like, well, it doesn't seem to be progressing. But it's just kind of up here. And I just sound bad, sound a little nasally.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I am a little, I'm not sick, but I do have a little bit of maybe like a head cold or something like that.
So I think that's and I'm not like avoiding your question, and we'll come right back to it. But I think that's another good place to start is, I think another role of a coach is if we're training ourselves, and I do this with myself too, is like we gravitate toward what we're good at, what we enjoy. And so we end up doing that a lot. We avoid the stuff we don't enjoy or which is hard for us. And then we may not make the best decisions when left to our own devices. And so I think that's the other role of a coach, is to really be that objective voice and to push you to get uncomfortable, but also to hold you back at times, like to be that objective opinion that can like see and be like, okay, you need to like back off. It's like, today's the day to take a rest day. And so I think just in general, I think one of my rules of thumb is like, if you're sick, if it's above the head, so, if you've got a sore throat or like congestion, stuff like that, you can keep training, but keep it moderate, zone 2 and less than 2 hours. If it's below the neck, if it's in the lungs, if you're having GI stuff, if you've had a fever, then it's best to just do complete rest.
Right.
But granted, like you said, you've had it for a while. It's not getting better or worse. So, and I think just like going back to this idea of me making wrong decisions, coaching myself, if I were in this position, a lot of times I might be like, if it were going, if it was kind of lingering for like several weeks or something, I'd be like, screw it. I'm just going to do a really hard workout, and I'm either going to go over the edge or it's going to, cook it out of me.
Yeah. So you guys will, hopefully get a lens into all the potential mistakes, I make, and Dave calling me out on that stupid shit. Or maybe I make some good mistakes, good decisions. But yeah, no, I mean, that's a learning point for myself.
Yeah.
If you're feeling bad, or if you have like, a little bit of a head cold, just regress, or, make it easier, go to zone 2 and just do that easy.
Yeah.
And, if it's worse than that, then just take the day off. Because ultimately, and I say this on my podcast all the time, it's like consistency is the biggest thing, right?
Exactly.
The biggest thing that matters in terms of in developing your endurance. So I'm kind of going in the face of that, because I'm running the risk of getting sick for, say, an extended period of time, a week, 2 weeks, whatever, which would then really, put me back.
Exactly. And as athletes, a lot of times we have we get tunnel vision, mm-hmm. and we only see what's right in front of us. And so sometimes we forget about the future, so that like the present, right? It's like, oh, I like don't want to miss this one workout, or I don't want to miss 3 workouts because that's going to turn up my training and all this stuff. It's like, yeah, but if you push through and you get sick and you miss 3 weeks, that's probably going to be worse. And so, not to turn this into a illness episode, but it's a good thing to remember, because I have another athlete that's she was just texting me the other day, and it's like she doesn't want to take a day off, It's like she's got a race coming up in like 3 or 4 weeks, and it's like, by taking these days off, then maybe you can still do your race, Maybe you're a little less fit, but then you're healthy and you can race still. So
Right.
Anyway, you had asked, what would it typically look like when I first bring on an athlete? And so, yeah, I think working with a coach, like the relationship really matters. And so it's like finding a good working relationship. And so finding out if me and the athlete are going to be a good fit. And so I would ask them some questions as to, have they worked with the coach in the past? What are their goals? If they did work with the coach, like what did they like about it? What didn't they like about it? Because like, I'm not the best coach for everybody. Like, and so it's like, if it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. And it's not like a dig on either one of us. It's like, you're just going to be better off finding somebody that's going to work more in the style that you respond to. Right. And so that would be the first thing, is just like getting on a conversation and finding out or getting on a call and finding out if we're going to be a good fit. And I think for me, one of the big things with athletes, as athletes, we always want results. We want outcome goals and stuff like that, but they're kind of few and far between. Chances are we're not going to win every race and, things like that. And so it's like, if you don't enjoy the process and if you don't enjoy training, then I'm probably not the coach for you, because I am a big believer in repetition and practice and, and consistency and doing things over and over again. And so, yeah, I think really getting a sense for why people train, I think, is really important to me. And so that's a question I'll ask. And what I've found is, if it's somebody who's more, the things I'm looking for is like, if they're training for others or for, recognition, stuff like that, or if they're training because, the things I'm looking for is, I train because I want to see what I'm capable of. I want to push myself. I want to, do those sorts of things. So Phil, why do you train? Why do you train and race?
Well, I mean, I would say that, over the course of however long we've been recording, the fast physiology episodes, and then texting back and forth, and then knowing each other from on a professional level as well, from me working at Moxie and you working at Full Gas, we kind of hit it off, in terms of, the banter back and forth and the friendship that we've been building and stuff like that. And for me personally, I require a lot of trust in an individual to coach me, because I've had a lot of coaches who have really let me down in the past in terms of not being able to explain why we're doing something, or, kind of having this power dynamic that I didn't agree with, in a sense, where they wouldn't take my input, or they didn't take me seriously, or other things like that. So, the interview process, I think, for both of us was kind of occurring, unbeknownst to us, for the last 6 months or something like that. And it just so happens that, luckily, you have enough time, to be able to devote at least, an hour or two, every other week or whatever it is, that we're recording and talking about stuff and those sort of things. And I think that's, for me personally, that's really what I need, is I'm going to be mostly in the driver's seat, picking out workouts and doing those sort of things, but then I'm going to run it by you, and then we'll have these conversations. So that's what I was looking for. And it just so happens that, that's kind of how, it aligned for both of us. You also had, kind of experience in both the mountain biking and, kind of running, sort of thing, because you've done both in the past. So that's another thing that I like. And I don't even know if I'm answering your question, but I just think,
why do you train, Phil? Why do you train?
But I mean, yes. So the reason why I am training is I think, and I told you this, it's the first and foremost, I just want to be healthy, because I want to be more effective at everything that I do in my life, whether it's recording podcasts, whether it's being a good partner in my relationship. And so that's really the big thing for me, is I need to stay healthy. And, a lot of the times, that's probably going to result in me being more conservative in terms of my training. Yeah. So being healthy is the first goal. That's what it is. And then the second goal is now potentially to see if I could put together some consistent training to do that race in May and just see what I'm capable of. Like, I know kind of what the other score, like the other times are and those sort of things. But at the end of the day, I'm just like, I would be really happy if I could just be consistent from now, which is October, to May, because I know that's going to give me a really good opportunity of giving the best effort I possibly could have, on that day.
Yeah. And so you just touched on a couple of things that I want to kind of go back to. I'll start with the latter. I take on a lot of athletes, and that's what they've struggled with. And it's like, usually it's not that complicated. Like when you asked me what I do. So first we get on a call and I interview each other. Then I'll have them fill out a form where I'm trying to figure out like what motivates them and what are their strengths and things like that. And then I'll ask them to give me access to their Training Peaks account or whatever they've been using. And what I've found, like one of my biggest fears, and I've been coaching for 15 years at this point, but I've always been afraid that I'm like going to get on and look at somebody's training and be like, no, you're doing everything exactly like I would do it. Like that's yet to happen. And so I like get less afraid of it. Right. But I usually find like I get into somebody's account and they're deficient in like one area. And it's usually either not enough volume, too much intensity, or consistency, right? And so really, one of my friends, he's kind of a mentor of mine, but like he always talks about low-hanging fruit. And so a lot of times, like that's what we're trying to address first. And you and I have talked about this on podcasts before, where a lot of people start with the marginal gains or like trying to like optimize and stuff like this. And it's like, let's get the foundational, like the basics right first, right? And so, yeah, I think that's one of the most important things. It's especially with running. When I did coach runners more and stuff like that, it's like, you got to stay healthy. Mm-hmm. And if that means, like you and I've said it before, where it's like, if 5 hours a week is what you can do week in and week out without getting injured, then that's what we're going to work with. Versus like have a really big week and then you get injured and then you take a week or two off and then you have a really, you know what I mean? It's like our goal is to get you to the start line healthy. And so going back to this whole project manager thing, it's like really figuring out like, how do we build a schedule that you can complete week in and week out without getting injured? That's the most important thing. Right? It doesn't have to be magic workouts. It doesn't have to be all this crazy stuff. It's like, what can you do consistently from now until May?
And I told you as well, like, I'm not the type of person who needs to have all these fancy workouts and other things like that. Like so that was like our first conversation. Yeah. Like, I just want to sit down and I just want to like, let's just make, some framework of what a week looks like, at least right at this very moment. From, like what I've been doing, what I can handle, what it seems like I can handle, what I'm willing to do. Cause that's another thing, right? Is if you try to like make an athlete do something that they really don't want to do, it's a huge uphill battle. Right. And then on top of that, like what I see as, like the low hanging fruit, like you were talking about as well. And, when you were looking through my Training Peaks account, was there anything that like stood out to you in terms of like the not enough volume, too much intensity, consistency sort of thing?
Yeah. Consistency for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, and you touched on it, right? It's like, you've had a hard time staying healthy.
Yep.
And I coached an athlete who you also know to Leadville this past year. She had done Leadville in the past, and she got pulled, I think, at like 70 miles. And so it's like I started working with her, and I looked at her account, and that's what I told her. I'm like, job one is for us to get 6 consistent weeks of training, right? I don't care what it looks like. Like, it's not magic workouts. It's like, can you do 5 rides a week for 6 weeks in a row without, getting sick or whatever? And then this year she ended up like, she made it. She like got her buckle and all that good stuff, but it's like, a lot of times it's just not that sexy or fancy. It's just finding out like, how do we find the workload that you can handle consistently? Yeah. And so let's talk about like, let's kind of have that discussion about like, what were you doing? And then what did we come up with?
Yeah. So I told you that, like my, just from constraints in terms of work and other things like that, like my time frame that I can actually work out is 60 to 90 minutes. And we might be able to, push that and be a little bit more pliable, a little bit later on in the season, but 60 to 90 minutes is really what I'm willing to do. And I really think, for me personally, having Saturdays and Sundays completely off, and just in terms of stress management and other things like that, is really important. Yeah. So that leaves 5 days a week, 60 to 90 minutes. And then I told you to generally, what I had been doing is kind of an A week and a B week. Yeah. The A week was trail run, bike, trail run, bike, trail run. The B week was bike, trail run, bike, trail run, bike. So I was kind of switching back and forth. And the reason, like, there wasn't really a reason why I was doing, actually the reason why I was doing trail running specifically one week and then biking specifically the other week is because my secondary goal would be to hold 400 watts for 5 minutes on the bike. And I like having an emphasized week, A and B week, because then I can come off of, I can come off of a full 2 days of rest and really, put a big effort in, like on Monday, and that can be either trail run or biking. So that's what I had been doing. And then I also wanted to incorporate like 3 times a week of, like just whole body lifting. It's not lifting, whole body weight exercises, because I'm coming off of a torn hip labrum. It's still torn, and it gives me issues if I don't do enough strength training and mobility work for it. But I do the mobility work kind of outside of training and stuff. So those are my constraints. The awesome thing is that I have a bike, in my house that's set up, stationary bike. I just use that for all my workouts. I have a shitload of equipment because I am an exercise physiologist. So if we want to do any testing or anything like that, it's like whatever we want to in terms of, our assessments and using those to train and track physiology. And then I have, I don't even know, countless miles of trails, anywhere from about 500 feet of gain over the course of half a mile to, 15, 20 plus miles of, moderately, kind of hilly, trail and road and stuff like that. So.
Yeah. And I just want to touch on something you said there. Like, you are not that unique in your constraints, right? Like that's the majority of athletes are working with something like that. I work with a lot of athletes that are moms and have jobs, and it's like trying to squeeze it in. And so, and you've said this on the podcast before, and I can't remember who originally said it, but it's like, what's practical becomes optimal.
Yes.
And it's like, maybe there is a quote unquote better way to do it, or a more optimal way. But at the end of the day, it's what you can actually get in is going to be the most optimal. And you and I talked about this with the strength thing. It's like at my core, I'm a minimalist, and I'm a big believer in like doing the right things consistently. And so just finding, when we were talking about strength, it's like finding those 3 to 5 exercises that are going to have the biggest impact and doing that consistently, versus like we talked about the snowball effect, where it's like, oh, I need to do this exercise. Oh, and I'd better do this exercise in a bit. And pretty soon you have a list of 25 exercises and you're overwhelmed. And so you don't do any of them.
Right.
And so it's like, let's find those 5 that have the biggest impact on your, on your overall feeling and strength and all that. And like, let's do those consistently. And so, yeah, I think like athletes should hear, like, most people are working against time constraints. And so it's like really thinking, like trying to figure out like what fits in the context of your life to have the biggest impact that you can also recover from and stay excited about. And, I think a lot of people start in the beginning, like their eyes are bigger than their stomach, and it's like, oh, I have this time and this time, and it's like they're stuffing every available moment. And so like me as a coach, I'm always like also pretty conservative. And so it's like, I think about like operating at 80%. It's like, okay, so maybe you have 12 hours, but let's like plan for 10. And then if you do like, when you do have the time and motivation, then you can extend. And we talked about that with your runs too. Is like, yeah, if you do have an extra 30 minutes that day, then go ahead and extend it with some more zone 2 or whatever, but don't feel like you have to, or you're falling short, you know?
Right. Yeah. I think from a motivational perspective, that's what happens to a lot of people, right? You know, January 1st comes around, you have all these goals. I'm going to lose 40 pounds. I'm going to do all this shit. And then you realize very quickly that what you decided to do was not actually sustainable. And as opposed to paring it down or starting with, let's just say 1 day a week,
right?
You go from, oh, well, I'm going to do it all out 5 days a week to 0. And then you're getting nowhere, right?
We see this with dieting too, right? Is like you're on such a, and sorry, like here's one of our tangents, but it's like, I started as a personal trainer and I saw that all the time with people who wanted to lose weight. It's like what I found is like, in order for it to be lasting change, you need to define something that you actually enjoyed so that it was sustainable. And same thing with like diets and stuff like that. It's like, you can't have like this crazy restrictive diet and you lose 20 pounds over 4 weeks. And then all of a sudden you crack and you just go way over the edge and you make up for everything in a day, you know? And so it's like, yeah, making small little changes that are sustainable. And yes, it's going to take longer to get there, but it's going to be more enjoyable and it's going to be lasting versus going for quick results and taking shortcuts, you know?
Right. No, I agree. And that's where, you know, like if somebody initially came to me and, you know, like I asked them, oh, like how much are you actually training? And they, you know, said 0. And then I would be like, well, let's just try to get 1 day a week.
Right.
Like, right. It's the same thing with, I mean, it's like with any habit change, right? You need to make something actually obtainable or attainable. And if it's, and that's where you stretch it. And then you do that goal for 4 to 6 weeks. And if that's accomplished, then it's like, okay, well, let's make a new goal. What's attainable here? And you say, okay, well, now let's do it 2 times per week. And a lot of the times too, like if you're starting with somebody who's like totally from scratch, just doing something is better than nothing. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's like, you know, so for me, right, I've been doing, you know, like a little bit of VO2 work and now we're getting back to, you know, kind of like the training stuff is like a little bit of VO2 work, a little bit of, you know, maybe like tempo work, but not very much. So the good news is that if I do implement some sort of intensity into my training, it doesn't have to be very much to be more than I was doing.
Right.
So from that perspective, I remember you kind of dissuading me, you know, from doing the A-B week. And you wanted to just really focus on really like the A week where we would do trail run, bike, trail run, bike, trail run. And if I recall correctly, it was more along the lines of like, let's just have 1 week, you know, that we can repeat over and over and over and over again.
Yeah. And
not get into kind of like the, you know, a little bit more of the confusion of, you know, having an A week and then a B week and then an A week and going back and forth. And again, I didn't really have too much of a, you know, reason one way or the other. I just kind of, my mind was just like, oh, A week, B week could be interesting. But yeah, do you want to share a little bit more of like, you know, why you would recommend that over something that's like more complicated in a sense?
Yeah. I love this. I had an athlete recently, like, and this happens a lot where an athlete will like ask me like, oh, why are we doing this? And I have to like stop and I have to think, because a lot of times it's just like subconscious and I'm like, why did I do that? You know, and so it's fun to like go back through. And so as you were just talking, I'm like sitting there thinking, why did I do that? And yeah, I think especially when we're dealing with injury, is we want to eliminate the variables. And so I think by having something repeatable, it allows us if something happens, we can take, like, even if you're like having a reaction to food or something, right? It's like we do an elimination diet. So it's like, oh, okay, your Achilles are hurting. All right, let's stop the trail run for this week and just stick to the bike and flat runs. And then if it's still hurting next week, okay, now let's get rid of the flat run and like just try the bike.
Right.
And if it's still hurt, versus if you're doing all these things and it's like something hurts, or if you're getting faster, it's like, well, what was it? What caused you to get faster? And so I like, and it's hard with athletes because I think like for a lot of athletes, I think training is their escape and stuff like that. And so there is a component of entertainment to it, right? But I think doing the same thing over and over again, it allows you to see progress. And like what we laid out, it's like you'll be able to know, okay, well, I started by doing 2 hill reps and now I'm doing 4. Or I started by doing 6 times 3 on the bike and now I'm doing 3 times 3 and now I'm doing 6 times 3 or what have you, right? And it's like, so it just makes it easier to know what's working, how much is it working, and if you are getting injured, if there are any like issues, we can remove things and see if it helps,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I like that explanation because, again, I think it's really easy to get caught up in the fancy. A lot of people think fancy is better, especially when it comes to training. And like for me, what I had been doing in terms of say strength training, nothing fancy. It's pull-ups, push-ups, ab movement, and then lunges and squats.
Right.
And then every day after I run, I do calf raises. But that's 5 movements. And
I love that you said movements, because that's how I think about strength true. Also, is like it's movements.
Yes, 5 movements that are all all you can progress them and you can regress them, which is good. And they like my goal for strength training isn't to look like a CrossFit athlete or get swole or whatever, whatever. It's, like the going back to the main goal is to stay healthy first and foremost, because it is, it was awful, working through like not being able to do like anything without, having your back flare up or, something like that. I'm sure a lot of people have dealt with this like sort of injury, but just staying strong has in slowly getting stronger over time has really helped to allow me to now be able to take on more volume in terms of both my running and my cycle. So that's a non-negotiable in terms of my but you don't really have to do that much in order to actually maintain that strength.
Yeah. And so let's talk about that too. Like, I think this is where people, I think you and I have talked about this also, but like we talk about like progressive overload or progression, right? And it doesn't mean that it has to be crazy workouts or anything. Like I think strength is the best example of that. It's like, oh, today you did 4 pull-ups and 8 push-ups. Okay, well, when you can, then you do 6 pull-ups and 12 push-ups. You know what I mean? Right. And then you add sets, and it just makes it. I wish people would do more of this with endurance training. Is like when we talk about strength, we always say like do as many reps so that the last couple are hard but with good form. Right? They should be hard, but they're not sloppy.
Right.
And once that gets easy, so if you're doing 10, then either add a couple reps or add a set, and you just keep like pushing it out that way. And then you add more weight and you know what I mean? But I feel like with endurance, it's like, we just don't stick with it long enough to like really see it through. But we can change that with you.
Yeah. Or people, so strength is really, really easy, right? To view the progression. Right. Went from, 5 push-ups to 6 push-ups to 10 push-ups, whatever. But like, for some reason we have it in our heads in terms of like the endurance community that like, oh, well, I got to do, like zone 2, but then I got to switch up my zone 2. So it's like 20 minutes on, 2 minutes off, but only in zone 2. And then, just to like, kind of inject some level of, I don't even know, some level of new, sort of whatever you want to call
novel.
it. And Novelty. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly what it is. And it's, if that is the way that that gets you motivated, to go to the gym and do that sort of stuff, by all means do it. But I will say that from a training perspective, it's not as ideal because you can't track the progress over time.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And you want to be tracking the progress in everything that, like, kind of in everything that you're doing, from low intensity to high intensity. So we decided then, well, it's like, okay, Phil, you like to do kind of like a VO2 max workout coming off of 2 days of full rest. It's like, yeah, it's kind of fun, right? It's an ego driver, to be like, yeah, I'm going to go fucking crush, some hills and see, how I can do. And the motivation is high, and typically the recovery and the muscles feel good. So we decided that, Mondays we're going to be a little bit more of like the VO2, like at least right now, VO2 max workouts. And what I had been doing, and I kind of did an override on the workout, which I'm still up in the air on it, but I was doing one, like, so I have this hill, run to the bottom, take the dogs with me because they need to get exercise too, and then we turn around, and then I do 1 minute on, 1 minute off going up the hill. Yeah, and that's that's like, I think it's kind of a primer. That's what I'll call it. I like doing it. It gets the dogs moving. Actually, they get pretty freaking tired by the end of it, or bored. I don't know, one of the two. And then I drop them off, and then I go to the other hill, which is way steeper. That one's a mile down and a mile up for like 500 feet of gain. The other hill is super, super steep, and that one is like, I was only doing 1 rep, but I have a start and an end, and for this week, I decided to do 2. And now I have, the time and how much I recovered going on the way down. So next week, I'm pretty sure I'll be home. Next week, I'll be able to do that again. And I'll be able to see, okay, well, how did the 1 minute on, 1 minute off change? And then how did the 2 by going up the hill change? And do they change? And if they stay the same, that's actually probably good.
Or it might go backwards a little bit, which I see a lot, right? Like you're in a training phase or a training block, and it's like you're getting more cumulative fatigue. And so it's like, yeah, you might get you might get slower as you get further in, and that's okay. Like we would kind of expect that, but you want to be faster when you come out the other side of a like recovery block, Right.
And do you see where my mind immediately went is, I either stay the same or I get better.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that was like literally didn't even think about, it actually could get worse too if I am accumulating some level of fatigue, which we know ultimately accumulation of fatigue and then and then allowing yourself to adapt is what's going to lead to super adaptation.
Yeah. Super compensation.
Super compensation. And but my brain, because I'm always trying to, I measure myself as better. That's kind of where it went. But so that was the first workout we decided on. And then I have a bike that I typically do, and typically I would do a like just zone 2 workout. But you convinced me that maybe doing a VO2 max style workout where it's like 3 minutes on, 3 minutes off, could kind of induce a little bit more fatigue. It's still the beginning of the week, so you're not going to be super, super tired. And I think initially we had planned 3 minutes on, 3 minutes off by 5. And before the call, you were like, Phil, what happened? You only did 3 by 3. I was like, dude, I was tired. So it was a learning process for me, because it's also okay to bump things down.
No, it should be. And that's the other, we were also talking before the call about like, trainers and like this idea that like everything's like super rigid, and it's like you have this many target watts and you do this many intervals, and it's like, no, it's all flexible. And so it should be like 3 to 5. And today it was 3, and that's okay.
And so the way I had programmed it initially for myself was based off of some bike testing that I did in a fully recovered state a little while ago. So I was like, oh, my reps should be I should be able to sustain, between this power output and this power output. I got on the bike today, and whether it was, I mean, it was probably a combination. I did the 2 uphills, which I hadn't done before.
Yeah.
I did the probably 6 by 1 minute on, 1 minute off. And I did, some level of upper body and lower body, sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So of course, like now that I'm like looking back at it, of course, I'm not going to be able to hit the targets that I was expecting. And this is, I was griping to you, Dave, of like my watch kept telling me you're not within the right boundary. And I was just so fed up. I just put my towel over my watch and it was just like stop, because I was so frustrated with it. Cause I was like, I can only maintain 300 watts right now. And that is hard for me.
Yeah.
So I did that. And then I was like, you know what? Like, my back kind of was like, like hamstring, so I was like a little cautious. I was like, I'm going to stop at 3 and then I'll just, kind of finish out with, like a little bit of easy riding and, kind of calm down from the frustration. That was the workout. Like the workout was fine. But it's okay. So what I want to know is, what is the rationale between having 2, sort of like hard days back to back?
Yeah. I'm just trying to break you.
Yeah, right. You're like, that's actually the first goal of a coach, is just break them. So then then
we build you back up. No.
Yeah.
No, it's like, again, as you're talking, I'm like sitting here thinking through it. And it's like, it was just something I picked up when I was a triathlete and coached triathletes, is this idea of kind of sneaking in another hard workout before the DOM sets in. Delayed onset muscle soreness. And so because yes, you're tired, so you've got global fatigue, and there is some overlap of the muscles you use run uphill and the muscles you use on the bike, but they're also different muscles, right? Like, and so even though you're tired, like we're hitting something a little bit different. And so now when you have that soreness tomorrow and the next day, like, then you can really take it easy. And we talked about like tomorrow is just a walk rather than run.
Yeah.
Like just keep it flat, because your Achilles has been bothering you, and
they actually feel good right now. So
there you go.
I'm happy with that. But yes, I will keep it flat, and won't push it.
And so the other thing, like as you're talking about it, it's like I think this is another thing that we run into. And this would be a great fast physiology, but it's like we get too, as coaches or even as athletes, we get too tied up in like, what physiology am I changing? Which physiology am I? And sometimes it's just about like, we're trying to work on endurance and fatigue resistance and durability and stuff. And sometimes it's just like, guess what? At the end of your 40-minute run uphill, you're going to be tired. And it's still going to be hard. And so it's good to have that mental familiarity with like, yep, you went into this workout feeling like, I don't know what I have today. And maybe you surprise yourself, maybe you don't, you know what I mean? And I think what we would hope to see over time is that, let's say you do 3 times 3 next week also, or, the following week, but it's like either the power starts getting higher or you're able to do a 4th one. And it's like, so you've just been better able to handle that fatigue on that second day than you were before. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or even from a mental perspective, right?
Right.
You're like,
exactly.
Like I don't freak out that my watch is telling me, all this stuff. Cause that, that's a sign.
It messes with you so much.
Right. And it's really hard. So when I was rowing, it was one of those things where when you were having a really bad day, the coach was just like, yep, just flip your monitor over and don't look at it, because there is almost nothing worse than when you have a target that you're supposed to be hitting, and no matter what you're doing, whether it's from a mental perspective, a physical perspective, or a combination of both of those, that it just like almost unravels your whole entire workout. And the point is not to it's to stress your mental capacity a little bit, but ultimately, it's like exercise is supposed to be enjoyable, and you need to meet your body where
right.
Where you're supposed
take what
to be
you're given on the day
too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you just brought up that's a really good point. And I see this a lot with races too. And I think, so it's good. Like we started talking about like outcome goals or whatever. Right. And it's like, I always say, like, I think issues happen when reality doesn't meet expectations. And so we can have this, like, an example I'll use is like a GPS device. Like, I've done a race where it was supposed to be 60 miles or something like that. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm just like going to 60 miles. I'm almost there. And then like 60 miles ticks past and you're like, shit. And then in a 61 miles, 62. And so it's like in my brain, I was going to be finished at 60 miles and all of a sudden I got there, and it's like, it can be catastrophic. It really messes with you. Like,
yeah. That happened during my 50K, and it was like 2 miles short or something like that. It was nuts. And I was
so
like,
you finished, you could have pushed harder, right?
I gotta almost be done. I gotta almost be done. And then finally they had some like flags that told me what the distance was that was left. And I was like, okay. So then I, it's like, so I was pushing hard, and then I found, like a final wind.
Yeah.
But it was almost demoralizing in terms of, I was just like, what the hell?
No, and it matters. Like,
one thing.
All that matters. And I think, I mean, you and I have talked about it a little bit. Like, I'm such a proponent of RPE, or perceived exertion, is because like things can be off. Like, so just like really getting a sense for like, how hard does it feel? And then see what the watts are, and then see what the heart rate is and stuff like that. But it's like, yeah, it can really mess with you if you're not hitting what you think you should be hitting that day.
Right. Yeah. And it's really easy for myself and a lot of other type A individuals, right? You're like, you say, okay, well, I did my FTP test. I got my zones. I know what my zone should be. And because we've put so much emphasis on the power, it's like when you're not hitting that power, it's like, oh, I'm a failure, or, something like that. And it's like, it's maybe you're failing this workout, but it's like, you're still getting benefit from it. Like, you're still doing the workout. Like, that's why, these are all the thoughts that go through my head when, like, I initially have 3 minutes on, 3 minutes off times 5 planned at a certain range. And then all of a sudden I'm not hitting it. I'm like, well, okay, like, I'm going to lower the power output because that's all I have today. And then I'm going to shorten it to 3 because it is not worth it to get injured. And I've already done 60% of that workout, and that's probably getting me 90% of the way there in terms of, adaptation. We were talking about this the other, like, last week, where it's like, the impulse that you get, from one interval is probably 80 or 90% of the way there. And then each interval after that is going to be, like, marginally more.
Yeah. The diminishing return. So I just want to bring up another example of this, like, reality not matching expectations, because, like, this is something I've talked to you about, and it's hard to get it out of my head, right? It's like, I did an FTP test outside, and really, like, a good big number, but then I get on my indoor trainer and I swear it's 20 to 30 watts lower. And so it's like, I just have to keep telling myself, I'm like, whatever, it doesn't matter. It doesn't, like,
nope.
All I'm looking for is, like, guide. So, like, it can be specific to when I'm indoors. I use these as my training zones or my targets. When I'm outside, I use these, but it's so hard because so much of it is tied up with my ego. Like, no, this should be 20 to 30 watts higher. Like, or what's wrong with me? Is it because, like, you just start coming up with and it's like, it doesn't matter. The workout's still happening. Like, it's like a tree falling in the woods and nobody's around to hear. It still happened. It doesn't matter if it wasn't recorded by Strava or whatever,
Yeah. And that's, I know. And that's where I think testing is a little bit of a double-edged sword, right? If you can set the expectations and say, hey, this is just a snapshot of what we're trying to get in time. We know it's going to be different indoors, outdoors, because maybe the power meters are going to be different. So we're going to have different zones depending on where you're at. And then looking into that further, right? It's like, I think that's okay, but then having it be something that, like, ruins, like, your day.
It totally can. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's tough. It's tough, right? No matter what, it's like, whenever I set a goal for myself, I think it's a realistic goal. And then if I don't reach it, I'm like, bummed about it. But I think that's kind of the beauty of sport is the ability to, you practice every single day. And it gives you the ability to fail. And by learning how to fail gracefully and come back the next day and continue to practice, that extends to so many other walks of life.
And I love that you say that, because you started off, when we first started recording, you had mentioned that, and I meant to say something about it. It's like, I started working with all bodies on bikes this year, and I had my kickoff call, and that's, as I was telling them why I coach and stuff, is like, that's such a big part of it. Is like, I realized, like, as we push ourselves to do things we didn't think we could and stuff like that, it does start to bleed into every other part of your life, and you get like confidence, and you try harder things, and you can be more resilient, and you can deal with things, and I love endurance sport for that reason. Like, I think it's a metaphor for life in like a small scale. And so if you can get good in dealing with the ups and downs there, you can deal better with them in life as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was just to finish this tangent out. That was actually one of the reasons why I was able to finish my PhD, is because I did an Ironman back in 2012, and completing that Ironman, I was like, there is nothing that I can ever do that will be harder than that Ironman, maybe a double or something like that. But at that point, it's like the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And I was like, a PhD from a physical perspective and maybe from a mental perspective is probably not as hard as an Ironman. Right. From a mental perspective, it's probably pushing it. Yeah. But I was like, if I can finish an Ironman, I should be able to take that and be able to do this PhD and finish this PhD. So it was like, that was like 2 years worth of me trying to motivate myself, to finish my PhD. And it was a lot of sports metaphors. I was like, okay, it's like, we got to get across the finish line. How do we do that? One step at a time. Because at the very end of my Ironman, I was cramping up every single time I would start running. So it was like, okay, get to the next cone. So I would think about that. Okay, what's the next cone I have to get to in order to tick off a little bit of my PhD? Yeah. I say this sort of stuff because I have used it in direct practice to actually then accomplish things in my life that at some points I didn't think were even possible.
Yeah, I love it.
But yeah, so back to the actual week of training. Yeah. So we've decided, and I like this. I like the 2 days, hard, and the second day is kind of like it's a moving target. It's whatever you can accomplish depending on what you did yesterday and how you feel. Totally.
And as we talk about it, I think, like I could see it going one of two ways, or anyway. So it's like, as you get more tired, as you start to carry more fatigue, it's like, maybe it does become more of a tempo day or an endurance day. Or going back to your idea of like the AB week, it's like, maybe down the road, there are weeks where the bike is day one and then the run is day two. But the reason that I typically do the run first and then the bike is because I don't like people running on tired legs, and I don't want them to like get injured. And so but like once you do have more of that solid base under you and more of that foundation, then it's like, yeah, maybe you can switch it up and you do it so that you come into that bike rested. And I just want to touch on too, I think the other reason it's important, like the bike does matter in this scenario, right? Like if you were just a runner and we were using the bike to supplement volume, then I wouldn't be too concerned with it. Like it's just a lever, right? But because you have these goals that are kind of overlapped. And so it's like, yeah, I feel like we can work on them both at the same time. And so it's just a matter of like kind of moving them around based on what we're trying to accomplish each phase,
Yeah, definitely. So we got those two, hard. And then Wednesday is it's really just accumulate time on the feet. That's what we've established.
Whether it's walking, whether it's, and it might be running at some point, but just starting with a hike,
Yep. And then Thursday is bike again. And right now it's going to be endurance ride. So it's going to be like zone 2-ish. And we said maybe, depending on how we're feeling and stuff, like how I feel and how I progress, we could transition that to a little bit more of a tempo. So like high zone 2, low zone 3, sort of work, depending on how we're feeling again. And then Friday, just to kind of cap off the week, it's more of like, and because there should probably be some fatigue on the legs going into Friday, we're doing more of like a sustained tempo effort on the run,
like threshold. Yeah.
Like
sub threshold. Yeah.
Yeah. RPE of 6 to 7, which actually I love that, because again, I like to do a lot of like these runs and stuff like on hills. So it takes away the need to do something where it's like, oh, it has to be this speed going up the hill, or it has to be this power output if you're looking at stride or whatever it is. So I like the 6 to 7 RPE, because then I'm like, okay, I can program, I think it's 3 minutes on, 1 minute off. And we start with 5 5 for the first set and then 3 for the second set. And yeah, I did it on Friday, and it was a great workout. Like, I actually like really liked it. I walked away from it like not feeling awful.
And I think I just want to touch on that too. I think that's the other thing is like, I think I've heard, I heard a coach, maybe it was Steven Seiler or something, like the Norwegian, they say something about you should only go see God every now and then. Right?
That was like, wait, that's Steve Magnus.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I also have said that, because I took that from him, and I was like, I love that. Only go see God like very rarely.
Occasionally. Yeah. And it's like this idea that like every workout should be like you're killing yourself to finish the last one, or what. It's like, no, you should walk away feeling good, like you had a few more in you. Like we're just trying to push the edge there, right? It shouldn't, like, everyone shouldn't be you like killing yourself, willing yourself to finish the last like minute or whatever. And so to hear you say like, yeah, it felt good. Like it wasn't a stretch. It felt like it was totally in control. Probably
like I was tired afterwards, but I was like, it didn't like wreck my day. 'Cause I've had workouts and stuff in the past where it's just like you do the workout and you're just like, shit, now I got to go to work. Now I got to record a podcast, and I got to do all this stuff, and I have no energy to do it. Right. So that's, so it was, I liked it, and I'm, it actually it was really slow, I think, but just cause I was like tired from the week, but at the same time I was like, because it's RPE, that's okay. It's like,
exactly. Right. And it's like, it's like maybe metabolically it wasn't threshold. It wasn't, but it's like,
right.
But it's like quicker turnover. You were pushing yourself a bit. There's a bit of that mental component where it's like just getting used to kind of pushing through. So and again, I would hope to see that build as time goes on, and you become more able to handle the load. Yeah.
It was, I'll report back, next week when I've actually done a full week of training. And then of course I'm going, on a business trip. So then I should be able to get most of the work in, next week, when I'm off in Kona, but it's going to be
heat training at the same time.
I know. I was talking like previous podcasts that I recorded just before this, and I was like, you know what? I was doing so well with like heat training and other things like that, because before I left, it was really hot here. And then I went over to Europe for a month, and it was like cold, and I didn't train very much, and I got sick. And I was like, all of those heat training adaptations just gone, but I was training the whole time. So there's still training adaptations from it. Look for the.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else you want to touch on? I think this was I think this is a really good way of, kind of allowing people to think about how they can set up like training and stuff like that. Yeah. I personally like just like, let's figure out like a week, like the week of training and how it could be laid out. And then we can think about, how can we, set up a season? How can we like shift maybe the focus from VO2 work to threshold work? Because ultimately a 40-minute run up a hill is like, that's like definition of FTP right there. Yeah. Right. Or critical speed or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, man. Don't get in trouble with the internet.
No, I second threshold.
Yeah.
But
I think that'll be a good one to talk about next time. I think the only thing I have to add is I just can't wait for people to light you up and tell you that we're doing it wrong and you're going to hurt yourself and all the other good things.
I know. I welcome it. Like I've said on probably all the podcast episodes, if you have a different opinion, please share it with me. Like,
Yeah.
as long as it's cordial, I'm more than willing to think and talk and grow in terms of me mentally.
Yeah.
So if you have any issues with the 2 VO2 max workouts in the beginning of the week or something like that, let me know. It will definitely, maybe I shouldn't really call it, like a VO2 max workout twice in a row, but whatever, vernacular is syntax.
Exactly. Call it an extreme domain. One of them can be VO2, the other can be the severe domain or whatever.
Yeah. Slightly easier than super hard.
Yeah.
But I'll also say too, then this is something you keep sending me posts on Instagram about like, oh, lactate's going to shut down your fat metabolism and other things like that. I'm aware, guys, that like, fat metabolism is important for endurance performance and stuff like that. I did study the mitochondria and how they oxidize fats and carbohydrates during my PhD. And the evidence that's been shared that I have seen that kind of shows that lactate completely shuts down. And I hope you're watching this on video, completely shuts down, I'm putting in air quotes, fat oxidation it's not supported. Like it's not an on off switch. It's a gradual thing. And what I will say is that even if I am generating a lot of lactate during my VO2 workouts and stuff like that, I'm still developing my mitochondria. And when you develop your mitochondria via high intensity work, you actually improve your body's ability to do everything from fat oxidation to carbohydrate oxidation. So you see a rising tide raises all ships in that case.
There you go.
So that was a tangent. Hopefully, fending off some people who might, like come at me in that sense, because I'm not doing, like, it doesn't really seem like I'm doing a lot of zone 2 work, and we know that that's the best for mitochondrial biogenesis. Is like, well, we got to consider what my true goals are, and my goal is to run really fast uphill for 40 minutes. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah. I think that's another couple podcasts that you just touched on right there. So maybe we'll get to those in another one. But yeah, I'm really glad we did this, and it'll be fun to do some more. So
yeah, and all kind of joking aside and stuff like that, if you guys do have questions, or if you guys do want to reach out to us and just like talk training, that's why I talk to Dave. That's why we do these podcast episodes, because we enjoy talking about it and we enjoy helping people learn more about training. And like I said, I don't know everything. So if you do, if something is confusing, just let me know. I'm more than happy to talk about it. You can always find me at Critical02 on Instagram. That's where I conduct most of my conversations in business and stuff. And then maybe every once in a while we'll jump on and do more podcasts or more episodes on my podcast. Like, for example, when we have some more physiological, things that we want to talk about.
Love it. And you can now text me. You can see it in the details there in the show notes. So I would love to hear from you. Just click the link, send me a text, and I can keep the conversation going. Until next time, thanks.